I never wanted to live inside the belly of the beast. All I ever wanted was something simple. 25 years on the job, a quiet pension, and maybe enough time left to enjoy a round of golf without constantly looking over my shoulder. But the city, it has a way of pulling you deeper and deeper into its shadows until one day you wake up and you've forgotten what light even feels like. My name no longer matters. For nearly a year, I stopped being who I was. I became someone else completely. I became Mickey. Mickey No Needles, a junkie with standards, fresh out of upstate, always chasing the dragon, but never quite catching it. That was the lie I told the streets every single day. The truth was much colder. I was still a cop, freshly promoted to detective the same day I accepted this suicide mission on paper. I had been erased. No records, no family, no past. It all started with the dead kids. Boys and girls, barely old enough to drive, were found lifeless in filthy alleys and school bathrooms. Pure uncut poison flooding the neighborhoods. The media was tearing the department apart, and the brass needed someone who could disappear into the filth without looking out of place. I was young, skinny, street smart from my own broken childhood. They offered me automatic promotion, hazard pay that made my hands shake, and an escape from the daily disrespect of wearing a uniform. I told myself it was just business. 3 brutal weeks of training followed. A beat-up Civic with hidden compartments. A pager that felt like a live bomb strapped to my hip. Then they wiped my identity and dropped me straight into hell. The first few weeks were the hardest. I let my hair grow long and greasy. I stopped shaving, allowing my beard to come in patchy and wild. I practiced the walk for hours in front of a cracked mirror. Shoulders slumped, eyes constantly darting. A slight, uncontrollable tremor in my hands. I memorized new slang. Every lie I would ever need. The smell of those neighborhoods never left me. Stale piss in dark stairwells, rotting garbage piled high in alleys, and the sweet, sickening chemical burn of crack pipes hanging in the air like invisible death. Every single night, I sat alone in my filthy rented apartment, listening to the old plumbing groan and rattle like something dying inside the walls. I would stare at the cracked ceiling, wondering how many pieces of my soul I was losing. With every passing day, slowly, painfully, I began to build trust. I approached the corner boys with a tempting offer. My so-called Marine brother in Kandahar could ship pure Afghan heroin that bypassed the scanners. High-quality, rock-bottom prices. They took the bait. When the underboss wanted a sample, I delivered it personally. When he wanted more, I asked for something bigger. I didn't just want to be a supplier, I wanted in. I wanted to learn the entire operation from the inside, for 6 long, soul-crushing months. I lived inside their world. I watched deals go down in abandoned warehouses, where the air tasted of rust, fear, and old blood. I listened to hardened men brag about selling poison to children, laughing about how weak and desperate some of them were. Every piece of information I gathered was passed back carefully through multiple cutouts. Arrests began happening. Never too many. Never too fast. I was careful. I was good at this dangerous game. But paranoia is a virus. The day everything changed started like any other gray. Lifeless morning, weak light leaked through the cracked blinds of my apartment. The place smelled of old cigarettes, damp carpet, and quiet regret. I had just poured myself a cup of black coffee, bitter and dark the way Mickey always drank it. When my pager buzzed, Pete was coming over. One of the mid-level guys I had grown closest to, just a normal meeting. Or so I thought. The footsteps on the stairs were heavy, slow, deliberate. When they entered the room, the air seemed to thicken around me. Pete didn't smile like usual. His eyes were flat, cold, empty. "Got some good news, Mick?" he said, sinking into my old sagging couch. "The bosses found the rat." My heart stayed steady. I had trained for this moment 1,000 times. I leaned back slowly, forced a long, relieved breath, and asked, "Finally, who the fuck was it?" Pete named him. Some nobody Indian kid, barely 20 years old, who worked at his uncle's corner store, the kind of place that moved small amounts on the side. My stomach twisted violently, but my face remained completely relaxed. They had the kid tied up in a basement downtown. They were beating answers out of him. They wanted everyone above street level to come watch, to learn what happened to rats. This could be a trap. One wrong look, one hesitant word, and it would be me chained to that chair. But refusing would look far more suspicious. Mickey would want to see the guy who almost destroyed everything. So I grabbed my jacket, checked a gun hidden in my waistband, and followed them down to the car. The drive felt endless. Rain streaked down the windows like silent tears. I stared at the passing streetlights, remembering my mother's face the last time I saw her. She still believed I was on a special assignment overseas. The basement was worse than any nightmare. Concrete floors stained dark with years of violence. A single bare bulb swung overhead, casting long, twisted shadows that seemed to move on their own. And in the center of it all, the kid. He couldn't have been more than 20. His face was swollen beyond recognition. Blood had dried around his nose and mouth when his eyes met mine for just a second. The raw animal terror in them tore something deep inside my chest. What followed was slow, agonizingly slow. They started with fists. The heavy, wet sound of knuckles hitting flesh echoed through the basement. The kid's gasps were broken, wet, desperate. Then came the cigarettes, pressed deliberately into his skin while his screams filled the room. The smell of burning flesh rose thick in the air, sweet, nauseating, and impossible to forget. I stood among the others, forcing myself to nod and smirk when they laughed. Inside, I was screaming. Every time the kid lost consciousness, they brought him back. Tasers crackling against his chest, smelling salts forced under his nose. His eyes would flutter open, confused, pleading, broken, only for the horror to begin again. I felt every single second of it, the cold, damp air on the back of my neck, my own heartbeat thundering louder than his whimpers, the metallic taste of fear coating my tongue. Hours dragged by like years in that basement. The kid's voice grew weaker, hoarser, until it finally fell silent. He sobbed that he didn't know anything. He was just trying to help his uncle. I believed every word. At one point, his insides began to show. I won't describe the full horror of it here, but the smell, that terrible smell of blood waste and pure human terror, still wakes me up at night. Eventually, he stopped waking up. There was no heroic last stand, no dramatic confession, just silence. And I kept my mouth shut because in that moment I learned the ugliest truth about myself. Staying silent was the easiest thing I had ever done. When it was finally over, the bosses gave their speech about loyalty and consequences. Then they sent us away. That night, after the extraction, I lay in a safe house staring at the ceiling for hours. The sounds kept returning, the wet breathing, the crackle of electricity, the way that boys' eyes had locked onto mine. Even now, years later, I still wake up some nights convinced I can smell burning flesh in my bedroom. I check under the bed out of old habit, half expecting to see that boy's face staring back from the shadows. Sometimes I hear heavy footsteps on the stairs that aren't really there. Sometimes my old pager seems to buzz, even though it was destroyed long ago. I left undercover work after that operation, returned to regular detective duties in financial crimes. But the streets, they never truly release you. Every once in a while, I see a young kid on the corner who looks just like him. Same scared eyes, same wasted youth. And the question still haunts me. What if Pete had been lying? What if they knew about me the entire time, and were just waiting for me to break? What if that boy died because of one wrong glance he gave a cop, and my own paranoia helped seal his fate? The guilt doesn't leave. It lives quietly, breathing slow, patient, and eternal beneath the surface of my life. I thought I was hunting monsters. Turns out, I became one of them. And the worst part is, when I look in the mirror late at night, the man staring back looks less and less like me, and more like Mickey.